So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this 11th in a series of panels we're doing with leaders of global accounting networks, alliances, associations, and we have an esteemed panel today of movers and shakers in this world. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment, but my name is Rob Brown. I'm delighted to be the chair of this panel, and we are just canvassing the opinions of some influencers around these crazy times, trying to navigate some muddy waters, and we're going to address a few issues that are affecting the accounting and indeed professional firms across the world. So I'm going to start with you, Garry, and just get you to do a little introduction. Then we'll go to Alun, Tony, and then Michael.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, I'm Garry Carter. I am president of an organisation called the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers, which I co-founded 24 years ago. We now have students and members in 134 countries around the world, and offices in 9 agents in a further 21, 22. And we are about bookkeepers who want to be bookkeepers, who enjoy being bookkeepers, and we are a professional body. Nobody comes in unless they are very highly qualified by us or by one of the other professional bodies. And then we maintain professional standards. And we are actually a Schedule 1 listed anti-money laundering supervisor under the money laundering regulations, which gives us additional clout, but at the same time, additional headaches.
That's great. Good to have you with us, Garry. And is it a good time to be a bookkeeper?
Yeah, actually, it is. Apart from 1 or 2 people who lost the plot in the very early days, the majority of our members are saying that business is absolutely booming because so many people that had not thought to use any sort of financial advice before, very much the DIY fraternity, have decided that they now need some help, particularly if they're claiming furlough and they don't want to get it wrong. So as we're the entry level to professional advice, I think we very much gained, if it's politically correct to say this, we have gained from coronavirus.
Yeah. Great. Well, lovely to have you with us. Alun Morgan, we've asked you back, so you must have done something right the last time. Welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, my name is Alun Morgan. I'm a director of Kudos International Network. We are a forum of firms network with 36 members around the globe, and we've been going since 2012, so a relatively newly formed network.
And are you finding it easy to recruit at the moment, Alun? Is this a good time to be part of a network?
Yes, it is for reasons I'm sure we will touch on later on.
Yeah.
But we've actually grown during the course of the current pandemic. Usually, the first few months of the year are a very quiet time for us, recruitment-wise. But I guess perhaps because people have had a little bit more time in March, April time, we've still managed to expand.
Yeah, well, that's great. Welcome. And Tony Szczepaniak, it is lovely to have you with us all the way from Minneapolis. Welcome, and please give us a little introduction.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. It's great to be here. My name is Tony Szczepaniak. I'm the global CEO for the Leading Edge Alliance. We're a global association that's right around $3 billion. We have over 200 member firms in 100 plus countries, 600 offices. And we are, full service, multidisciplinary practice. Primarily, I would say the majority is in North America. However, we do have some very strong firms in Europe, Latin America, Australia, as well as Asia Pacific. So.
Thank you, Tony. Great to have you with us. And Michael Reiss von Filski, the colourful character that you are, is wonderful to be joined by you. Please give us a little introduction.
Thank you, Rob and gentlemen. A pleasure to be here with you. I'm Reiss von Filski. I'm the global CEO of GGI, also known as Geneva Group International, established 25 years ago out of Switzerland. Currently 605 members in 126 countries are part of our association, 840 offices worldwide. Roughly 29,000 professionals involved in these member firms, and we generate a combined fee income of $5.6 billion US, being multidisciplinary. So we have accounting firms, law firms, and consulting firms in a balanced proportion.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. We have 2 of you that definitely look like accountants. Alun and Tony are a little bit more relaxed, and I'm very relaxed. But listen, let's get right into it. We are in crazy times. We've had a global crisis as early as 2008-9, we probably all lived through that. Garry, I'm going to come to you first on this one, but generally, how good are accountants and bookkeepers at responding to change? Did they learn from what happened in the economic crash, and how have they coped generally with what's happening now?
I think you tend to find that the financial professions cope with whatever is thrown at them. I can't say so much for the investment side of our profession, but certainly in accounting and bookkeeping, I think it's what we do. We're there to help people through, and we continue to do that. As bookkeepers, what we are finding is that a lot of the smaller firms who have perhaps never used any form of financial support before, they've very much done it all themselves, have found that they were unsure of how they were claiming for their furlough payments or whatever it might be, or their loans, and they do see the future as being a little bit more tricky. So they have, in quite substantial numbers, decided to take on some form of bookkeeping support. And as we're if you like, the introduction level, we are somewhere in many ways running completely different to the billion-dollar turnovers that you were all competing with a minute ago. Obviously we are a completely different format altogether. We are a professional body, I think we've all coped pretty well. I mean, I think we cope differently. Bookkeepers are peripatetic. They get around. They don't sit in their office. They do go out and see clients. In fact, they do most of their work on clients' premises. But thankfully, because of cloud, I think they were very early preparers for what has come about purely by chance. Yeah. And so everybody was very quick to be able to offer almost exactly the same full service that they were offering before, albeit cloud-based. But I do think that when this is finished, probably a good 20 to 30% of clients will still want the personal contact that we've always given. But I think looking at the way our bookkeepers then, particularly for their larger clients, work with a firm of accountants, the accountants seem to be coping. And I think in many ways the ability to send a bookkeeper out to do the work and then report back has also seen major benefit to those firms.
Yeah. Tony, this is not your first rodeo. You've run a number of associations and networks. You've probably been through a couple of recessions. What did we learn from the last crisis, and how are you seeing your members coping?
So I think, overall, accountants as a group are really change resistant. I think they don't like uncertainty, but that's kind of the education, the training, if you will, kind of prepares them for that. And so, the last recession, I think, is a little bit different. And I think that, one of the points that someone on one of your previous panels made about there's the pandemic, and then there's the pending upcoming global recession that we seem to be pointed to.
Yeah.
So I think that there's some different there's some different dynamics at play. But I think overall with this pandemic, I think that the learnings from prior recessions has been that we are a lagging industry overall, and so we're going to be the last to feel the pinch, if you will, and we're going to be the last to come out of it. And so I think the way I've seen a lot of our member firms responding and reacting to the current pandemic is, yes, there's some decisions that are needed to be made quickly because of the pandemic, but let's not panic and start creating issues, or addressing issues before they need to be addressed. So I think some of the learning is really where we need to make the right decisions. So, for example, getting everybody, all of their teams with the right equipment to be able to work remotely, over a week's time, if you will. Those decisions were made quite quickly, but then it's really, there are some firms who have clearly made some salary and staff adjustments. But in a global survey that we did earlier in May, the vast majority of people have not let people go, and I think that's part of the learning is let's let's not react to this. Let's lean into it. Let's make sure that we're preparing appropriately for the upcoming steps that we've got to go and endure. So
yeah, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit about the opportunities and what's coming up in the future. Michael, you know that accountants are super smart. They're technically brilliant, but that, as has been hinted by Garry and Tony, they're not always great at pivoting and changing, are they?
Well, I would tend to object because I think that in this world of networks and associations and alliances, our member firms, and be it accountants or lawyers, they are also entrepreneurs.
Right.
So they're not just managers of a firm, they are entrepreneurs. Usually they grew with their clients together. There is a level of trust which is beyond just a commodity. And I think, I mean, probably we all experienced that very unpleasant moment when we noticed that this was not a flu and that a lot of things were going down the drain. And that moment when we thought it was really, really complicated, it seems now a few weeks ago, and I'm surprised to, and pleasantly surprised to see that the accountants and lawyers that I know, they have managed with resilience and with a robust response to pull themselves together for the benefit of their clients and their firms. So I wouldn't go for the stereotype and say, oh, these accountants and lawyers were shocked. Yes, we were all shocked, but it was a short shock, and then we went into the right direction, I believe.
Yeah, sure. Alun, how do you feel the accountants have coped with this, and what have they learned from before?
I would have a foot in both of the camps that have spoken so far. I think those entrepreneurial accountants that Michael just mentioned, I think have coped admirably well and have changed very, very quickly to working at home, and are probably going to keep some of their staff working at home in that of the awful phrase, the new normal. On the other hand, I've also seen some firms that perhaps are less entrepreneurial, maybe are more your sort of techie type of accounting practices, and there perhaps the change has not been as easy for them, and they have struggled in one or two cases in particular for a variety of reasons. So where there's a degree of the ability to think laterally, I think the firms have coped really well, but the sort of traditional accountants, for want of a better phrase, have struggled a little bit, I think.
Yeah, there was a piece in the media just this week from Accounting Web that said that 512 accounting firms in the UK alone have gone out of business. Some of them are award-winning firms, so we'll definitely get some shifting around. Some firms, as you're saying, have coped very well. Others have been found wanting. So let's talk about the support you're giving them. And I'll start with you first here, Tony. Why do professional firms, need to plug into any kind of network and alliance right now? And what are some of the ways that you've helped your members?
So I think, what firms have really been forced to address, some of the technology, investments. I appreciate what Michael has said earlier, because I think that where the state of accountancy is today is, we label firms as accountants, but because of the significant increase in advisory services and even some multidisciplinary, it's not all accountants that are in the firm now. And so I think that you see those firms that have more of a blend, they would be more the atypical accountant, if you will. And so I do think it's those firms that have the perhaps the more entrepreneurial spirit, as Alun and Michael have referenced. But I think it's important for alliances to really be able to create connections. I think fundamentally, what individuals are being asked to endure or forced to endure over the last 12 weeks is very isolating. And I think people need connection. That is a fundamental thing that we as a human species need. Now, firms can provide that connection, and many of our members do. However, I think what we can provide is that cross-regional, cross-global connectivity, where you're actually bringing people together to share best practices, to support one another about, I woke up this morning and, my world was incredibly different. Well, yeah, so was mine. And so you get these people together to talk about that, but you also get them together to start focusing on, well, let's share a common client problem and work on that. Let's share a common firm challenge and let's work on that, because for a moment in time, we can maybe forget about the fact that we're locked down in our homes or our apartments or wherever we're at, and we can actually maybe focus a little bit more on solving a problem. And that's a great thing for bringing people together and solve some of those things.
Yeah, very good. Love that. Michael, this is not a time to be alone, is it, as a professional firm?
Totally agreed. And I think we noticed all of us have changed to webinars and all sorts of Zoom meetings as the true alternative to watching TV. But whilst the professional content is of course of the essence, what I noticed was how people were looking forward to connecting again with fellow members. And it's an act of solidarity. It's exchanging views with all sorts of rather domestic questions. Well, can you go out? How about the barber shop? The South Africans couldn't buy wine or any other beverage, which increased the thought of how difficult it must be for them. And ultimately, I thought, if you in our organizations, we all had mainly the chance that the members knew each other before COVID-19, and the virtual world helps a bit to bridge this gap and to make sure that we stay connected and that we exchange views and ideas, and also business, of course.
Yeah. Alun, it's vital to be part of something bigger than yourself, isn't it? And we know that accountants, bookkeepers, they love certainty. And we're not in a certain world right now. There's a lot of anxiety around. There's a lot of unanswered questions. Why do firms need something like Kudos, and how have you helped them?
I think they need the reassurance that the processes and systems that they put in place are reasonable. They can learn off each other. One of the things that we have done is as a network, we have met much more often in the last 3 months than we had done previously, using Zoom, for example. Although interestingly, just as regions so far, so we haven't brought the whole membership in as one group, or as Tony suggested just now, perhaps on a cross-regional basis, largely because it's easier to deal with in terms of time zones and to learn from each other, I guess. But we've had quite a few of the regional meetings now where people have been able to bounce ideas off each other, touched on technical matters as well. And looking at things such as cyber security, for example, when people are doing homeworking, so just to get an idea as to what best practices are, and to learn from each other.
Yeah, well, makes a lot of sense. Garry, when we think of bookkeepers, we tend to think of them quite isolated anyway, doing their own thing. All the more reason why they would need to plug into something and share.
Yes, I think we've noticed that people are far more connected to us now, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, when you look at our membership, if we take the UK, which is obviously where I'm sitting at the moment, we would normally expect to know reasonably well about 30% of our members. There'd be another 30% that we would meet at our conferences or something or other, and there'd be 30% or more, 40, that we never meet. We don't know who they are. They keep paying their subscriptions. They tell us to leave them alone, and they sort of get on with their lives. But that has changed, and they are now coming to virtual branch meetings, they're coming to virtual conferences. We do an Inspire tour every year. We tour around 22 different cities normally, and I physically go to every one of them. We run great meetings. Everybody enjoys them. We get around about 2,500 people coming to that. As soon as this started, day 2 of lockdown, we began our own TV program, ICB TV, which was a Zoom meeting basically. And the first meeting, we had 7,210 people going to it. Now, those figures have dropped to just over 3,000 now on a regular basis, but nonetheless, you know, I'm a bit like the beer that shall not be, the lager that shall not be mentioned, we're getting to corners that we've never reached before, which is fantastic. And I think the thing is that, yeah, they tend to be, you know, about 60% of our members work by themselves, and 40% have staff and teams there. So particularly the 60%, they're at home and they do need contact with the outside world. And the other thing I think about our members is 80% of our members are women. Now, women, I have to say, have got more concerns than just looking after their clients, because they are now teachers and childminders most of the time.
Sure.
So we have a lot of our Zoom meetings where we've got children in the background and people coming in because they want something, or, you know, can I go and watch the telly, mum, or whatever it might be, which is not to say the men aren't trying and struggling as well. But this feeling of camaraderie it's been absolutely phenomenal, you know, and it's a tangible new effect of what's come about. So as far as being a professional body is concerned, the big thing for me now is how we're going to keep this ball rolling as we come out of it and people get back into the norm.
Sure. Well, keep your powder dry for that one, because I'm going to be asking you suggestions. But just as an open question to any of you, just to finish this off, although we wouldn't want a pandemic like this, and there's a serious side to it, you must be very thankful that it's happened now, because if this had happened 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had Zoom, we wouldn't have had the Wi-Fi, we wouldn't have had the means, I guess by phone maybe, to keep in touch the way we have. Any thoughts on that?
It would have been a disaster, I think. Yeah. You know, we literally decided about 3 o'clock in our office. We heard it was being said on the news. We're going to be locked down. We all walked home, took our communication with us, and we were up and operational. Half the office went home and were operational that afternoon. Half went home at night and were operational by the following morning. So, yeah, I mean, weren't we really clever to foresee this and invest in so much technology?
Tony, you were going to add something there.
I think very much like what Garry was going to say. I think, you know, if there are silver linings that come out of something as tragic as the COVID-19, I would say we do have the capabilities and the capacities to be able to adapt like this. And I think there are a number of firms and organizations, you know, members who are on the early adoption phase. There were still plenty of people that were at the back end, but because, you know, the technologies were available, I think it made for a much smoother transition.
Yeah.
And I would even say, you know, look at, I think, Alun, you mentioned something about cybersecurity. I mean, I just think of you know, LEA, we're a completely virtual office, but just some of the data security functionalities that we have been able to put into place, you know, so that no matter where anybody's at, our members' data is secure as if we were all in one office.
Yeah.
So I think that's really key.
Sure.
And also, I would just like to add, I think that the technology advances over the last maybe more 15 years rather than 10 years perhaps probably saved lives, because at the end of the day, I think more people would have been forced to actually go to work and keep the economy moving, and they've been able to keep the economy moving more so working from home and staying safe.
It's an excellent point. And who knows, the mental health toll, which has already been vast, of people being isolated, but at least, as you've all hinted, it has given us a chance to stay connected and have conversations rather than the feeling that we're all on our own. So yeah, we can be thankful for that. Okay, so Michael, I'm going to start with you on this one. You're going to tell me that all of your GGI professional firms have been fantastic and they've not had any challenges and they've coped with everything brilliantly. But honestly, some firms have hit obstacles, haven't they? They have maybe made some mistakes. They've had some critical problems. What stood out for you in that area?
Oh, absolutely. And I think not just GGI firms, I think all firms all over the world. Again, I think there was the initial shock. I remember we had in February still a tax conference in Frankfurt, and with some 70 participants, and some of the Italians already didn't want to travel, and it wasn't too clear. But we thought, okay, it's not going to be that bad. And then, of course, we noticed, yes, it was going to be very bad. And indeed, some very few firms, they were caught in the most impossible moment. Of course, when you doubled the size of your office and quadrupled the size of the mortgage and invested, thinking that the growth of the past 2, 3, 4 years would go on like that. Crystal clear, but we didn't have too many panic reactions, thank God. And again, also as a network, we're here for our members. So if a member says, look, I'm getting the yearly fee and it's a bit of money, is it possible to pay in 2 installments? And of course we can address that, and we can sort it out. So I think, yes, some firms got rid of staff initially. That's the most known reaction to reduce cost. But funny enough, most of them took them back.
Yeah. Alan, what have been some of the challenges that your member firms have had in this?
I think it's something which I alluded to earlier on. I think the lack of ability to think laterally, but also I think what has challenged firms is that working from home, as a number of firms have had to do, doesn't actually suit everyone for a variety of reasons. It could be personal circumstances, space issues, communication issues, and in some cases just personality issues. It hasn't always worked that well for me working from home. I was working in a co-working space because it was a better way for me to get work done, being in a sort of work type of environment. And I think it's been different in different firms across different countries. And I think the challenge is to recognize that the solution for a firm or even an individual member of staff is not going to be the same solution as for the next member of staff. I think the good entrepreneurial firms that care about the staff have recognized that and have dealt with staff on a flexible basis.
Yeah.
Some firms maybe less so.
Garry, Alan brings up an excellent point. We're all different, aren't we? You would think that bookkeepers as a race, hanging out in the cloud, used to working from home, would be very adept at dealing with this. But have you seen any mistakes made or challenges they've hit?
Yeah, because I think the misconception is that because they're cloud-based, they sit at home and everybody does anything remotely. And in fact, a very large proportion of our members use the cloud-based technology to make their life easier. They're still doing the same work for their clients. And a couple of things that we have noticed. Firstly, some of our young go-ahead entrepreneurial people have fallen foul of this because they don't have that close contact with their clients. So their clients go to who they think can help them, and they haven't always turned to their bookkeeper. And I think this is an important lesson for some of our members, a very small number of our members to learn. So it's all very well being whiz-bang IT people, but you've got to be friendly, you know, and if the other gentleman will excuse me, I always say, look, if you lose your friendliness, you're going to become accountants. But anyway, they'll let me have that one because they can't get at me. And I think the other thing is that we are finding that we are getting complaints now from clients, not in particularly large numbers yet, but it's a growing number, who are saying, they've given me this piece of software to do all my expenses on, and I don't want to do it. So can you find me another bookkeeper who will come and pick up my bag of receipts or whatever it might be in my box and do it all for me? And I think bookkeepers have always been at, you know, the bottom end of the chain, if you like, but it's a very important part of that chain, and they've got to remember that. And if they're not careful, they will miss out. So we have seen a few mistakes there. I don't know if you're going to cover it later on, but one of the things that we're finding as an institute is, yes, we're all enjoying ourselves working from home, and we're virtually exactly the same as we were, still ring the central number, etc., etc. But some of the younger people who've been now locked down with their parents and their siblings are saying, I need to get out because my work is also my social life. And, I know from our past history that many people that have worked for us have met their future partners within our working environment. You can't do that if you're working from home. So I think the dynamic might have to change a little bit as we come out of this, which is going to be interesting to see if everybody suddenly gives up their office and says, this is it, guys, we're saving £1 million a year on rent and rates, go away and work at home.
Yeah. Tony, I saw you nodding at quite a few things there.
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking about actually is going back to a couple other points that were made earlier. Is that what Michael, Alun, and Garry have said. I don't know that I have to add in terms of mistakes, that I've seen our members make, because they certainly have made some of the similar mistakes. But I was almost thinking, helping engage in the appropriate dialogue and discussion to avoid the mistakes that potentially are about to be made or could be made. And that is, Garry made the point about, about relationships and things like that. There is a conversation going on within the LEA community right now is, at what point do you go back, and is there a time that you go back too quickly? Is there a point that right now there's a lot of discussion around, well, we're not going to need nearly as much office space, so let's just slash the amount of office space that we have. And so I think a lot of members are and firms across the board are wrestling with, how do we return to whatever that normal is, as we come in.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a step into the future in a moment, Tony. But I haven't heard any of you say about, not particularly focused on clients. It's a fact that some clients have not been well served by their accountants and bookkeepers. Some firms have not quite got it right. Some firms have not been well led. Some firms have shut up shop and stopped the communications. Some firms have dumped loads of information out there and not been particularly insightful and thought leadership. So there have been mistakes made, certainly not in your member firms, but some firms have been found wanting, haven't they? Anyone?
Yeah, I've been honest about it. Yeah, some of the people who we thought were our shining stars have very quickly looked after themselves first and dumped their clients, which, it's a difficult thing not to do when you suddenly, as I say before, become teacher and, you've suddenly got your partner under your feet that you've never had them under before, etc. And you're trying to run a business as well. It can be very difficult, but we have all sorts of things in place to try and get people to preempt something like this. Not a virus, but obviously some people every year will unfortunately get ill or need extended time off work. And we have something called a COPE, which is a continuation of practice engagement. It's a plan which all of our members sign up to. And it kicks in at times like this when you can't do something. So you have your buddy down the road who will take over some of your clients for you, and they're not going to poach, they're not going to take them away. But yeah, it's been quite surprising. The people sometimes who you would have thought were a little more fragile have actually risen to the challenge here. So it's been a bit of an eye-opener. Yeah. But it unfortunately, it happens. There are people that are not going to come out of this smelling of roses.
Sure. And we've asked a lot of our professionals, Alun, when we look at opportunities now, we know that accountants have had to become counselors, therapists, psychiatrists. They've had to deal with the emotional side of this, not just with their own anxiety of maybe being furloughed or working from home, but the anxiety of their clients and their businesses that they're looking after. But looking at the positive side of this, where do you think firms will find opportunities for growth and recovery in the next couple of months?
In terms of growth, I think technical advice on grant availability, loan availability, general financing advice, and the key soft skill I think moving forward will move away from necessarily, in some cases, the face-to-face advice and the ability to give advice, maybe using different formats, maybe such as Zoom, and still establishing some form of personal rapport, but alternative ways of perhaps giving the advice on a more mass market basis via good written communication, or even via podcasts, for example. And I think the other opportunity for firms, maybe not so much to improve the top line, but in terms of cost control, is not just in terms of slimming down the size of the office space, but possibly learning from this that your geographical location may not be a restriction as to where you recruit people from in the future.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone in the firm should be located 2,000 miles away. Obviously not, but there's a core of people that perhaps, particularly on the technical side, geographical location doesn't matter.
Yeah, Michael Alun brings up an excellent point there. There are now no barriers to where you recruit from and also where you draw clients from.
Totally agreed. I think that's one of the chances we've learned from this crisis, that I have to admit I was not very fond of the concept of home office on a regular basis. I used to call it internally Netflix time. And I have learned that, in fact, it has changed. It works very, very well. And technically, that means that professional service firms, they can hire people from different parts of the world, work part-time. You don't have to have the fancy, lavish offices all over the world. That's very true. And I totally agree, Alan, that the alternative ways of advice are essential. But if you allow me to add one component, which I believe is really essential. A few people I know, they were very gloomy and doomy, and their clients didn't like it, because the clients said, I want professional advice. It's going to cost me $200, $300, $400, $500, £600 per hour. And the last thing I want is to pay for advice if someone tells me, oh, everything's so bad. Oh, the world's going down the drain. I don't know what's going to happen. We're losing clients and so on. And that's the point, when the client who's still semi-alive, who's seeking for professional advice, but also for some entrepreneurial guidance, maybe even just a word of optimism, saying, look, it's not going to be easy, but together we can make it. We'll sort out, you'll get the best possible advice, and we'll make it happen. That we'll put all effort in. If that doesn't happen, regardless if it is a one-man show or a 1,000-person professional firm, if you have an advisor who doesn't manage to transmit a layer of optimism, it's not going to work.
Tony, that's a great point, isn't it? Trusted advisors are now standing in the gap there, and they are a source of hope, a source of encouragement, and the clients are now driving the need for advice. And surely, whatever the question, whatever the problem, whatever the plans and opportunities, the accountant, the bookkeeper, the lawyer, the trusted advisor is the answer. So are you optimistic? Where are the opportunities? Tony, sorry, yeah.
That was for Tony. Yeah, I think Michael hit it spot on. I mean, whenever you have, the kind of situation, the kind of environment we're in right now, people just want to be told that things are going to be okay. And so they want leadership. And clearly, the public accounting space is a space where a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs look to for that. So I think opportunities, I think Alan was right, from a service, it's about the restructuring, it's about the governmental grant support. But I also think it's just in terms of what Michael said is leading clients. And sometimes that means making some some bets and some decisions that, that are not too short-sighted. And so, right now, public accounting firms, have been going through a 3 or 4 year period, 5 year period where it's, our business model is actually changing. We need to start investing in some of the emerging technologies. And I'm talking beyond the Zooms, beyond the Microsoft Teams, if you will. It's the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the natural language processing. It's at a time like this, when it would be so easy to say, well, let's just not do that. I think leaning into that, I think, is even going to be even more important, because I think that continues to position, the firms for the future, and it demonstrates some leadership. But I think Michael is spot on when it comes to that leadership from the standpoint of putting arms around people. And I would also say that that's about the talent too, because oftentimes if you were to put client needs and talent needs in two columns, oftentimes you'll find they are very, very similar.
Yeah.
So if you're addressing the talent needs appropriately and effectively, that's going to naturally give you a stronger client experience as well.
Yeah, very good. Garry, opportunities for growth?
Yeah, I think there are some opportunities for growth, undoubtedly. I think one of the big problems that has arisen over the last couple of years is this word advisor, which, if you're giving that to an entrepreneur who can really give good advice to clients, that's a great move, because that's what client wants, as everybody has already been saying. Unfortunately, a lot of normal accountants who are really good at the bookwork have also become trusted advisors, whereas in fact they don't have that additional flair that is needed. And I think when big firms are calling people advisors, they have to think of this. And we're finding very much now that our members who deal with firms of accountants, we've got lots of firms of accountants who are really sort of what I would call old-fashioned, dyed-in-the-wool, high street accountants, are suddenly calling themselves advisors. But it's just a posh title. It doesn't mean anything. So you've got to really understand what advice is about, and I think that's important, because small businesses particularly, and we deal mainly with micros and small businesses, they're out there by themselves. This is a troubling time for them, and they know their product normally, but they don't know how to run a business. They don't know how to get the best out of, their income. They don't know how to get the best out of their costs, and they really do want something more from us. And if we can provide that, the opportunities are absolutely limitless, because a lot of people run a business by the skin of their teeth. They just about get through without giving it much thought. They don't really treat their business anything other than a cash cow. But when times like this come, they have to concentrate on eking every little pound out of it. And I think that is where we come into our own, if we are really servicing our clients properly and we are really becoming trusted advisors.
Yeah. Well, I am detecting a sense of optimism around the panel, so I'm going to put a damper on that right now as we draw to a close and just call it how we see it, that there is a global recession looming. We know that tax bills that have been deferred are going to become due, both for accounting firms and the clients they serve. We know that some furloughed staff are not going to be coming back. We know that loans that have been taken out are going to become due. The consensus is that 2020 is going to be a slow recovery, and 2021 might be even tougher. So I'm asking you, gentlemen, in your closing remarks, with the recession looming, what advice and encouragement would you give for firms and individuals to deal with what is coming up over the next few years? Alun, can we start with you, and then we'll go to Michael and Garry, and I'll ask Tony to finish off.
I think two things: arm yourself with knowledge.
What kind of knowledge?
Tax technical knowledge as to how to maybe kick some of the tax liabilities further into the long grass, and how to actually get better finance for clients. But importantly, then actually have efficient ways of communicating that information to clients in a way that they can understand and they can appreciate and they can take action on.
Yeah.
To actually be that arm around them, as someone said earlier.
Sure. And without stealing anyone else's thunder, this may come up, but you said arm yourself with knowledge. Would you also arm yourself with new skills as we enter a new world?
I think the skills should already be there, but if anything, it's communication skills, and you can arm yourself sometimes with technical skills. Arming yourself with soft skills is a lot more difficult.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael. We are dark times looming. So, what words of encouragement and advice have you got for the accountants and professionals watching and listening?
Well, first, I tend to disagree. I think it's not going to be easy. That's crystal clear. But I don't think that we'll go back to Stonehenge and we'll have some Mad Max scenarios. People were saying that about the financial crisis. Didn't happen. People were saying that there was going to be a brutal inflation coming up after the financial crisis. Didn't happen. Target inflation rate of 2% in the Eurozone was hardly ever reached. Now, this is a different animal. I totally agree. And it's not going to be easy, but I think I totally agree with Alun. Arm yourself with knowledge and connections, I may add, to say, well, maybe your distribution channels you had in this and this country are not fit for purpose. Maybe it's time to change. Maybe it's time to change the corporate structure, take the production plant out of the real estate company, separated, and be prepared, brace for impact, so to say. And then at the same time, use the opportunities. Tony said very rightly that the profession is the last to feel the pinch and the last to probably get out of it. So that means law firms and accounting firms, they have a couple of months or maybe even 12 months time to get ready, which means benefit from the experience of home office, of having talent maybe, which is not in a metropolis doing some work, be conscious with the cost. We have all seen that we can have an international flavor without traveling, without moving out of our living room, so to say, and putting that all into the right perspective and being diligently, step by step. I think that it is possible to believe that we're going to reasonably get out of that crisis.
As humans, we are resilient, so let's hope that. Garry, there is optimism here, but equally we know that tough times are ahead. So what advice and encouragement would you give to the professionals watching and listening?
I think we have to realise that there are going to be some tough times, and some people are going to survive this. Unfortunately, some are not. But I think that everybody needs to work. Everybody needs an income. So hopefully the entrepreneurs are there thinking, well, this didn't work. What am I going to do next? I think we've got to be there to encourage it. I mean, Alun said we need more knowledge. Michael said talent. And I think, yeah, we do. We need to hone in on the talents and the knowledge that we have as professionals and be able to share that in a communicative way with all of our clients, and help get them through it. You know, that's what this is about. I mean, I understand, I'm not 100% sure these are the right figures, but I quickly looked up. This is going to cost, this current pandemic is going to cost the UK about £200 billion. The banks were bailed out to the tune of £500 billion. So we've got 300 billion lying around somewhere, guys. You know, let's put everybody back to work. We have got to sell ourselves out of this. That's what it's about. I don't, you know, the one thing I have noticed with some firms that we deal with, they've tried to cut back on everything. They've got rid of people and all the rest of it. That isn't going to help in the long run. I think you can only do it, you know, go for the top line, but look after the bottom line. And I think we trade our way out of this if we can. And I think you've all said as well that we as professionals have just got to remain positive, because nobody wants to be told, you know, nobody wants the water being described when the ship is sinking. They want to be helped out of this. So we've got to go in there without looking overconfident. We've got to be resilient. We've got to help with them with their resilience. And we are absolutely the right people to do this.
Yeah. Tony, they do say that this is going to be a reset and not a reboot. And what I mean by that is, you don't turn your computer off and on again and things are exactly how they were. This is a reset. We're playing a whole new game now. So what advice would you give to the professionals watching and listening to cope with what's coming up over the next year or two?
I think I'd re-echo a lot of what's already been said, but I would say focus on the relationships and the transactions will follow. Focus on the relationship. So that means staying close to the client, staying close to the people and the talent that you've got and invest in them. I would say, all the partners of our member firms, who are the entrepreneurs. The last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of hay that's been made. And now there might be a recognition that for the next 12 to 18, maybe 24 months, maybe the levels of income, that they've had, maybe that needs to be a little flatter, and the investment needs to be in the long haul. So treat those clients, treat those people well. Now is the time to invest in that. Lean into your alliances. Now might not be the time to be investing in a lot of extending or expanding into new niches, simply because of the potential environments. Maybe opportunistically, but as an overall growth strategy. And there's, within your alliances, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of capabilities that can be tapped into, to be able to serve those clients, to be able to give the talent those opportunities, to be able to serve them. So finally, don't panic. The reality is, this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And the way you win a marathon is putting one step forward at a time.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. This has been terrific. Gentlemen, is there anything on your mind that's burdening you that you just want to get out as a final thought before we wrap this up? We've covered such a lot of good stuff today.
I think finally, just to say, communicate. Everybody. And we've been persuading our members to get their clients onto joint meetings, and their clients to get their clients onto joint meetings. This is a golden opportunity. You use this as an excuse, and you can get around 50 or 60 clients in one go instead of it taking you 3 to 4 weeks. The opportunities are there. Technology exists, and actually we're all used to seeing each other sitting at home, and it doesn't matter anymore. We are still business people in a business environment, and people have accepted it. It's there and waiting for us to use it.
Alun, you're nodding there. You're up for the fight, right?
I couldn't agree more with what Garry just said about almost strength in numbers when you communicate. And one of the ways we've communicated with firms on technical matters is by having more webinars with 80, 100 people attending at a time, and it's much more efficient to get the message out there.
Yeah, Michael, we found a new way of working now, haven't we? So things are never going to be the same.
I don't know. I think there might be some sort of hybrid, that there will be some virtual components, and there will be some new reality again, and we will travel again. Maybe in a different way, maybe not as often, but I think, I'm 45, and my parents both passed away already. They were war children. They were small children during the Second World War, and all of us here, we have or had parents or grandparents who experienced 1 or 2, at least, very, very nasty wars. And our American friends came over twice, when Europe was in big political and military distress to help us out. And we seem to have forgotten all that. And we say, oh my God, I can't go for the Porsche. I have to go for the Twingo because there's a crisis, and maybe I can only have a small holiday in Bristol and not a long holiday in Mallorca, and so on. We should remember the generation of our ancestors who built up all these firms that are floating around here now as multinational firms, larger firms, or still existing firms, albeit small. And we shouldn't forget this mindset that, you look into a newspaper and everything's a crisis. Everything is dramatic, the slur in the stock market. We've had collapses in the stock market in the last 4 weeks. We've got plenty of them. And then when it goes up, nobody talks about it that much. We should focus on the mindset too.
Yeah, and totally finally from you, all 4 of you are in position where you are leading leaders, and you are leading the superheroes that are on the front line, if you like, of business health. And you certainly sound like you're up for it.
Absolutely. I think you've heard from this panel that there's, while there might be a global recession looming, there certainly is a lot of opportunity out there, and there's a lot of need for positive leadership moving forward, and I think we're up for it.
Yeah, well, you guys all have a role to play. It's been so wonderful to have your insights and your contributions today. I want to thank you all so much. I'm going to keep the room open just for a few more minutes. You can do some informal chatting, but I'm going to stop the recording. So just give us a quick wave and a thank you now.
Thank you.
And we are
Thank you.